On the morning of March 16, 1957, at 8 a.m., a 300-foot-long spaceship landed in a field in Alexandria, Virginia, United States. Upon receiving the report, police officers immediately rushed to the scene. There, 2 local officers witnessed the spaceship's door slowly opening as they arrived. The officers, uncertain of what might happen, drew their guns. To their surprise, however, it wasn't a gray-like alien that emerged from the spaceship. Instead, a man who appeared entirely human stepped out. The man gave a gentle smile to the startled officers and waved in greeting. Before they could say a word, he spoke in clear English.
"I would like to meet with the President."
When you think of famous UFO incidents from the past, what comes to mind? Perhaps the Roswell incident? The case we're introducing today, however, is less about a UFO sighting and more about an alleged relationship between extraterrestrials and high-ranking officials, including the president. This story takes us back to the 1950s. The story is often regarded as the first official account by a senior U.S. military officer of an encounter between humans and humanoid extraterrestrials. What unfolds may seem unbelievable, but it's sure to spark curiosity. Let's delve right into the story. As previously mentioned, this story begins in 1957, when a spaceship landed in an open field in Alexandria, Virginia, United States. The man at the scene told the officers that he wanted to meet with the then President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The name of the man who stepped out of the spaceship was Valiant Thor. Although he is sometimes referred to as Val Thor, we'll primarily call him Valiant Thor in this video. The spaceship he arrived in was called Victor 1. He and his companions were said to possess extraordinary abilities beyond human capacity, one of which was telepathy. Through this telepathic connection, the officers became convinced that he meant no harm. Trusting his intentions, they followed his instructions, placing him in the backseat of their patrol car and taking him to the Pentagon. As many of you may know, the Pentagon is the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, located in Virginia. On the morning the spaceship landed, a man named Harley Andrew Byrd received an urgent phone call. Harley Andrew Byrd was the nephew of Rear Admiral Richard Byrd, known for Operation High Jump. He worked at the Pentagon as a senior official in Project Blue Book, the government's UFO investigation program. Incidentally, Project Blue Book was a top-secret military program dedicated to studying UFOs from 1952 to 1969. Around 8:30 a.m. that day, Harley Andrew Byrd received an urgent call from the Alexandria police. The officers informed him, "We're on our way to the Pentagon with an extraterrestrial right now." A few minutes later, the police vehicle arrived at the Pentagon, where Secretary of Defense Charles Wilson, 6 staff members, and numerous police officers escorted this mysterious visitor. The man who stepped out of the car was tall, around 185 centimeters, with brown eyes and a calm demeanor. He had slightly tanned skin and was described as remarkably handsome. With his natural positive telepathy, Valiant Thor smoothly bypassed all security measures without resistance. 6 armed guards then escorted him to what appeared to be an elevator. The elevator descended rapidly to the lowest level. After switching to an underground subway, they proceeded directly to the White House. 6 senior government officials, 6 armed guards, and 3 Secret Service agents escorted him to President Eisenhower's office. The president stood up from behind his desk, while the Secret Service members looked visibly tense. As Valiant Thor extended his hand toward the president, the Secret Service agents drew their guns, aiming them at him. At that moment, the representatives were stunned. Some felt anger, while others experienced fear. However, at the president's nod, they reluctantly lowered their guns. Standing in front of his desk, the president said,
"You know, of course, that we have suspended all ritual rules. I have good feelings about you. Please, sir, what is your name?"
Then he answered, "It's Valiant." Without missing a beat, President Eisenhower asked, "Where are you from?" He replied,
"I come from the planet you call the Morning Star in your Bible, Venus."
Venus?
Yes, Venus.
How many visitors from Venus are currently on Earth?
Currently, 77 of us are walking among you in the United States. We are constantly coming and going.
Can you prove that?
What exactly would you consider as proof?
I don't know.
Will you come to my ship?
President Eisenhower, with a puzzled expression, replied,
My friend, I cannot come and go freely. There are others I must consider. I need to consult the committee and ensure security measures are followed. Please, stay here for a while. Let's get to know each other better.
At that moment, another gentleman rushed into the room. It was Vice President Richard Nixon. Valiant Thor then spoke.
Earth has been quietly observed for thousands of years, but with the invention of the atomic bomb, my people have decided to intervene. I have been sent as an emissary of the High Council, representing many planets and many intelligent beings.
That's what he explained. They sought to protect humanity from various harmful influences of the time. He went on to propose something remarkable. If you abandon nuclear weapons, we can teach you advanced space technology at no cost. This would allow you to cure all diseases, ensure longevity, eradicate poverty, and achieve a deeper sense of spiritual fulfillment. Valiant Thor stated that the High Council could help solve many of Earth's problems, offering their support to do so. At this moment, he also revealed that intelligent life exists on other planets and there are countless solar systems in the universe. He then agreed to collaborate with the US government, offering some of his technology over the coming years. Thus, Valiant Thor's mission was officially set in motion. The meeting lasted nearly an hour, after which he was returned to the Department of Defense with VIP status. He spent the night at the Army reception office on the first floor, near the concourse. Afterward, he was given a beautifully furnished apartment in the Pentagon with VIP status, where he agreed to spend the next 3 years. It's said that from this apartment he maintained communication with his spaceship, receiving the latest updates and information. Let's take a moment to describe some of Valiant Thor's unique characteristics. Although he appeared human, one notable difference was that he reportedly had no fingerprints. Amazingly, he could also pass through walls and teleport to locations at will, allowing him to move freely between various sections as he pleased. Valiant Thor was not only endowed with extraordinary abilities, he was also described as incredibly compassionate, gentle, and radiating an overwhelmingly luminous aura. The military personnel were also intrigued by the clothing he wore. They attempted to examine and test the jumpsuit worn by the extraterrestrial Valiant Thor. The military eventually came to refer to it as the Miracle Garment. The jumpsuit he wore was a one-piece garment extending seamlessly down to his boots with no buttons, zippers, snaps, or fastenings of any kind. It was a puzzling garment, leaving everyone wondering how one could put on clothing with no openings or fasteners. The suit had enough fabric to cover a person about 183 centimeters tall, yet it weighed only around 170 grams. Additionally, it was made of an indestructible material. They attempted to pierce the material with a diamond drill, but the drill broke under pressure. Even when they used lasers or applied acid, the suit remained unaffected. Finally, they fired a high-speed rifle at it, but the bullets couldn't penetrate, nor did they leave a single scratch. Valiant Thor explained that the garment was made of a material not found on Earth. Following this unexpected visit, President Eisenhower requested that Valiant Thor attend a meeting at the home of Howard Menger in High Bridge, New Jersey. This meeting was a small gathering of researchers and scientists to advise the president on the UFO issue. Valiant Thor agreed to the president's request and was also permitted to bring along all 3 of his alien crew members, Don, Jill, and Tanya, who also attended the meeting. Fortunately, valuable footage from that meeting was preserved. This photo was taken by a young Air Force photographer named August C. Roberts, who captured images of Valiant Thor and his team. At the time, Roberts was one of the world's leading photographers. This photo is said to depict the crew members of the spaceship Venusians, captured during the meeting. The main topics discussed included ways to end world hunger, cure diseases, and stop wars. Valiant Thor also emphasized that all nations possessing nuclear weapons must disarm. Valiant Thor was shocked to learn that the people gathered here were often treated disrespectfully by the media. Nevertheless, he was reassured to see that they remained steadfast in their beliefs and pursuits despite such treatment. Hearing this seemed to put Valiant Thor and his team somewhat at ease. During the meeting, they shared methods to end war and other insights, At this moment, President Eisenhower held a message from the High Council in his hands and said,
"The people of this earth are not prepared to handle the conditions that would arise if the recommendations of these otherworldly visitors were put into action."
At this moment, Valiant Thor realized he could not accomplish his mission alone. He felt he needed to find open-minded individuals on Earth who could help persuade the world's leaders to embrace these changes. After this, there was someone who would go on to establish close contact with Valiant Thor. That person was Dr. Frank E. Stranges. He was the founder and chairman of the National Investigations Committee on UFOs. Additionally, he was an author and a member of a global Christian denomination, holding doctorates in theology, psychology, and criminology. Dr. Frank later revealed the strange story of the extraterrestrial Valiant Thor and his mission in his 1967 book, Stranger at the Pentagon. In his book, Dr. Frank described it this way.
Who would believe me if I spoke of this strange encounter with a man from another planet? I considered keeping this incredible story to myself, but the more I thought and prayed about it, the more I felt that sharing it would bring great blessings to those who would hear or read it.
In Stranger at the Pentagon, Dr. Stranges detailed how he first met Valiant Thor. One day, Dr. Frank received a call from a very excited August Roberts, who had photos taken at the High Bridge gathering. He was the photographer who had taken pictures of Valiant Thor and his team members. He told Dr. Frank, "I've got photos of extraterrestrials, but I have no idea what to do with them." Dr. Frank was immediately captivated by the photos and soon began using them in his lectures. After concluding his lecture in Washington, D.C., Dr. Frank was signing books and chatting with guests. In that moment, a woman named Nancy Warren appeared. She introduced herself, looked around, and then quietly asked Dr. Frank, showing him her Pentagon ID card.
"Would you like to meet the man in those photos?"
Dr. Frank eagerly jumped at the unexpected opportunity. The next morning, he arrived at the Pentagon, where Nancy Warren escorted him to Valiant Thor's quarters. At this time, Dr. Frank was careful to stay alert for any signs of deception or fraud. Valiant Thor approached slowly from the front. With a warm smile, he extended his hand and said,
Hello, Frank, how are you?
At that moment, Dr. Frank was struck by Valiant Thor's overwhelming sincerity and charm. As they shook hands, Dr. Frank noted that Valiant Thor's skin had the softness of a baby's, yet his grip quietly conveyed strength and power. He described Valiant Thor's voice as both powerful and gentle, leaving a lasting first impression. Strangely enough, Valiant Thor seemed to have extensive knowledge about Dr. Frank.
My purpose in coming here is to help humanity, which has drifted farther from God than ever before, to return to Him. There is still ample hope if humans seek the right path.
He spoke these words with optimism. Dr. Frank, curious as to why he was granted this honor, asked Valiant Thor about it. Valiant Thor explained.
Dr. Frank, it is because you are open-hearted, always engaging with people, and a messenger of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
In essence, Valiant Thor's mission was to save humanity, specifically to help guide people back to God. Valiant Thor asked Dr. Frank to help spread this message and in return promised to share the wonders of the universe with humanity. This meeting with Valiant Thor was brief. He agreed to cooperate with the U.S. government and provide some extraterrestrial technology. He also committed to leaving Washington, D.C. no later than March 16, 1960, 3 years later. However, upon reading Dr. Frank's Stranger at the Pentagon, one might sense that Dr. Frank continued to have contact with Valiant Thor for several years beyond that initial period. Additionally, at the time, Valiant Thor reportedly had less than 3 months to speak with scientists, politicians, and military officials. Initially, some of those aware of his presence repeatedly stated that his existence and ideas posed a threat to the political and economic structure. In reality, Valiant Thor's proposals were not going very well. Even now, this might still hold true, but at that time, the top leaders in various fields were filled with personal ambition, showing little concern for humanity's urgent needs. Valiant Thor's efforts to put an end to the diseases and plagues afflicting the planet were, unfortunately, met with rejection. Some religious leaders also feared that if his presence were officially acknowledged, they would lose their influence over people. Dr. Frank expressed deep regret that the administration could not accept information that could steer human activity in a positive direction, purely for economic reasons. Valiant Thor repeatedly urged the president to hold a United Nations conference to initiate the process for Earth to join the galactic community. President Eisenhower was open to Valiant Thor's ideas and wanted to follow his guidance, but each time he tried, he faced interference from the CIA and the Department of Defense. They feared that if Valiant Thor's message spread widely, many would follow it, potentially threatening America's military dominance. And so they restrained the president. By that time, they already held more power than the President of the United States. In fact, in January 1961, during his farewell address, President Dwight D. Eisenhower pointed out the existence of the military-industrial complex. He warned of their potential to exert excessive influence on the nation and society, with significant impacts on the political, economic, and military decisions of Congress and the government. At that time, increasing international pressure was also weighing on the administration. From around this era, issues related to extraterrestrials were classified as top secret. They fought diligently, enforcing strict regulations with severe penalties for anyone who disclosed the existence of Valiant Thor. Even a prominent news anchor who accidentally learned of his visit through a paid informant was silenced by them. The CIA consistently denied any knowledge related to UFOs. At the same time, Dr. Frank asserted that they held secret files that undeniably proved the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life. To backtrack a bit, Dr. Frank's second encounter with Valiant Thor took place about a year later. One day, while Dr. Frank was driving in Beverly Hills, California, Valiant Thor suddenly appeared in the back seat of his car.
Hello, Frank. How are you doing?
When Dr. Frank pulled over, Valiant Thor moved to the front passenger seat, and their second meeting began. He continued the conversation by asking Dr. Frank about his work, his family, and other aspects of his life. That day, Valiant Thor disclosed details about some of his activities on Earth. He revealed that communication devices were hidden in certain homes around the world, including in Reno, San Diego, Los Angeles, and Geneva. This device was a holographic communicator, making it appear as though the person you were speaking with was physically present in the same room, standing right before you. Dr. Frank described how he was astonished when he saw this device in use, unable to believe his eyes. This device enabled communication between bases on Earth, spaceships, and a headquarters ship orbiting the planet. Seeing such advanced technology in the 1950s would indeed have been a mind-blowing experience. Experiencing these sci-fi-like encounters with Valiant Thor might make you feel a bit envious of Dr. Frank. However, his experiences weren't all positive. Those who possess knowledge of the great cosmic secrets or study UFOs often find themselves targeted. Valiant Thor had foreseen the high likelihood of danger for Dr. Frank and frequently warned him. Unfortunately, these warnings began to manifest in reality. One day, after giving a lecture in Germany, Dr. Frank nearly died when his meal was poisoned while he was on the phone. Although Dr. Frank survived, he soon received a call from Valiant Thor at the hotel where he was staying.
Frank, how many times have I warned you to be extremely careful about whom you meet?
Valiant Thor said somewhat sternly on this occasion. A few years later, on his way to a meeting with members of Valiant Thor's team, Dr. Frank was intercepted by men in black clothing driving a black Cadillac. They seized his briefcase, forced him into their car, took him to the desert, and assaulted him. However, Don, a member of Valiant Thor's crew, appeared on the scene. Extending his arm toward the car, he melted the rear tire, pulled the men out of the vehicle, and gestured toward the black car with both hands. Within seconds, both the car and the three men lying on the desert floor vanished completely. Don simply said one thing.
Frank, let's just say they've been disbanded.
Later, while driving on the highway, Dr. Frank and his wife were rear-ended by a suspicious car, forcing them off the road and resulting in a severe accident. Once again, the men in black were attempting to remove Dr. Frank from his mission. Again, Dr. Frank's neck and back were broken and he went to the hospital quite badly and almost died. At that moment, Valiant Thor appeared immediately. After asking the doctors to leave the room, he instantly healed Dr. Frank completely. Amazingly, Dr. Frank walked out of the hospital that day in perfect health. It goes without saying that the doctors at the hospital were utterly speechless. The men in black are no laughing matter. Their threat is truly real, Dr. Frank stated. Then in June 1968, Dr. Frank encountered an incident that would leave one of the deepest impressions on his memory. Valiant Thor reached out to him that day, instructing him to come to San Diego Airport. He guided Dr. Frank to the parking lot, got into his car, and they headed south toward Mexico, crossing the border until they reached a small restaurant in the town of San Felipe. San Felipe is a coastal town almost entirely surrounded by the sea. Expecting they might have a meal, Dr. Frank was surprised when they parked the car just behind the restaurant. They began climbing over some rocks and walked along a beach hidden from the restaurant's view. Dr. Frank had not been told where they were headed. They boarded a small boat, started the engine, and set off. Out on the water, Dr. Frank witnessed an unbelievable sight there before him. A silver spaceship was hovering above the water's surface. As they approached the craft, it shone brightly, reflecting the light of the setting sun in a breathtaking display. That's right. Valiant Thor invited Dr. Frank aboard the spaceship known as Victor 1. At that moment, Dr. Frank recalled how Christians and colleagues had looked down on those who spoke of aliens or spaceships. But he realized he no longer cared what anyone thought of him. As the hatch opened, a smiling woman appeared, accompanied by a man. They both greeted Dr. Frank by name, took his hand, and helped him aboard the ship. The interior of the ship was incredibly spacious, comfortable, and finished with light-colored decor. Dr. Frank was given a tour of the ship, noticing a panel with a series of buttons on the wall. Valiant Thor pressed one of them. Suddenly, a section of the wall became transparent, revealing a clear view of the outside. Dr. Frank noticed that the floor felt like a thick cloud, molding slightly under his feet with each step. The room had no corners or right angles. Everything felt organic and peaceful. There was also a dining area where he enjoyed food and drinks that hadn't originated on Earth. The food was rich in protein, and the drink was green with a refreshing flavor, tasting remarkably similar to papaya. Dr. Frank spent one of the most precious nights of his life there, and the next morning, Valiant Thor returned him to San Diego Airport. Their ship, Victor 1, is said to be stationed along the shore of a lake east of Las Vegas, remaining invisible. Thousands of people on Earth are aware of Victor 1's existence, and a limited number of Earthlings, including a few scientists, have visited the ship. However, it is said that no government officials have ever visited Victor 1. Dr. Frank also spoke about these extraterrestrials, describing them as follows. It's remarkable to see the faces and reactions of people when these angelic beings appear before them. Some feel a strange sensation throughout their bodies, others chuckle without knowing why, and some become deeply emotional, with tears welling up in their eyes. Valiant Thor also suggested that their species lives underground. He mentioned waves of aliens arriving worldwide to help resolve Earth's seemingly insurmountable problems, and he spoke about it this way. He said, "Groups from distant planetary systems will come to offer assistance and data to help advance Earth's progress." Valiant Thor's 3-year mission concluded in 1960, but unfortunately, this mission could not be deemed a success. Upon completing his mission, Valiant Thor is said to have eventually returned to Venus. In this video, we explored Stranger at the Pentagon, the book Dr. Frank published in 1967, which documented all the time he spent with Valiant Thor. Using this book as a guide, we've shared these fascinating stories with you. What did you think? The book has received numerous opinions that it broadens one's thinking and consciousness, making it an intriguing read. However, there are also some critical perspectives. This is partly because Dr. Frank was originally a Christian evangelist and missionary, and much of the book intertwines his Christian faith, Jesus, and Valiant Thor. Additionally, since he frequently lectured across the country on the connections between UFOs, God, and the Bible, some have speculated, is this book really just a way to spread the word of Christ? The contents of Dr. Frank's book are indeed intriguing, captivating many people and often becoming a subject of debate even today. While it's hard to believe that everything he wrote was untrue, it's equally challenging to accept it all as fact. However, the truth about Dr. Frank and Valiant Thor has already come to light in modern times. Who revealed it? That's the Galactic Federation envoy, Elena Dannon, who was featured in a video on this channel. In my last video, I made a video of Elena Dannon's interview with Val Thor. Elena has since interviewed Valiant Thor. In it, Valiant so clarified that he had indeed met with Dr. Frank. However, he also mentioned at the same time that there were many problems with Dr. Frank's books at the time. However, please note that this content is not included in the previous video. These contents may be made into a video when the opportunity arises. Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving it a thumbs up and sharing it. See you in the next video.
Thank you.